I'm Morelli here, UCU member and USS negotiator for UCU members on the Joint Negotiating Committee. Bill Galvin yesterday issued a statement criticising a paper called Made in Westminster about the valuation of the scheme, in which the criticism being made at USS is that their valuation is based upon the university's going bust, is flawed, and that their measure of self-sufficiency is not that. Instead, it's the bankruptcy of the sector is referred to as the buyout value. I want to make a quick statement about why that's wrong. The buyout value is the value that would be required to pay an insurance company to take the whole scheme and provide an annuity. I couldn't do it. There's no way I could provide a scheme that big. But anyway, that's the buyout value. Self-sufficiency, in their view, is the ability to continue paying pensions out of the existing scheme, but using a low-risk value of pensions or set of assets, which largely are gilts, so it amounts to pretty much the same thing anyway. But nevertheless, they argue that their measure of self-sufficiency does not require the scheme to go bust and be handed over to an insurance company. However, I want to suggest that's not quite right. Using the metaphor that USS provide, let me explain what their thinking is here and why it's flawed, and why the defined contribution proposals are so dangerous to this scheme. USS argue that self-sufficiency is the equivalent of thinking about a boat in a rough sea that needs to get to a safe harbour. The safe harbour is self-sufficiency, and the boat is our pension scheme. So the gap between the boat being able to get to the safe harbour is the gap in funding that exists in self-sufficiency that will allow the pension scheme to survive. And the equivalent of the metaphor is the boat is in the rough sea, and you decide you're going to sell it to somebody who can bring it into the safe harbour for you. That's the buyout option. Nevertheless, getting it to the safe harbour is the key issue here. In their terms, I should point out. I'll explain that in a second. So that's the idea of the metaphor that they use: this safe harbour and low risk assets in order to pay our pensions if the safe harbour is required. And the gap there is the gap of additional contributions that employers will have to pay, 7% of our salary on top of the current contribution rates, if an extremist situation emerged that the safe harbour was needed. Here's the problem. The boat is our pension scheme. The rough weather is the price of assets, stocks and shares, and so on. The issue around the rough weather is that prices of stocks are going up, and as USS will tell you, the price of paying for a pound of pension in the future today is more than it was a year ago or 10 years ago, because prices of stocks have gone up. So in other words, the waves are getting higher. The question there is, will the waves get lower? Will prices go down? In other words, the cost of providing those pensions will go down as well. They may do, in which case the argument should be that the pension managers, and this is what they're paid for to do, is to know whether or not they think this is going to happen, is not to buy those stocks and shares today, but wait and buy the same ones tomorrow when they're cheaper. If, on the other hand, you think these prices are going to stay high forever, and they're not going to correct, there's a long-term increase in prices, then it doesn't matter. You bought them now, you buy them later, sell them later, and the difference isn't going to make any difference to the scheme. And why does it not make a difference to the scheme? It's because it's not the waves that are the problem. The problem is the boat. The boat is our pension scheme. What does the boat do? It takes our money in as contributions, and it pays our money out as benefits, as pensions. As long as that boat can carry on doing that, I'm sorry this metaphor is getting bad, but anyway, as long as that boat can carry on paying our pensions out of its current contributions, it's got a positive cash flow, it makes no difference how high or how low these waves get. They can do what they like. They can't sink the boat unless the boat springs a leak. Why might it spring a leak? Because now the contributions in do not match or exceed the contributions out. Why might that be the case? Because we've got a negative cash flow. Where will a negative cash flow come from? Ending the defined benefit scheme and introducing a defined contribution scheme. USS themselves say that in 5 years of the defined contribution scheme coming in, we will have a negative cash flow. This boat will begin to leak, and then the size of these waves do matter, and then the distance from the boat to the safe harbour does matter, and then these extremist payments do matter. What USS are doing is reckless. It is destroying the scheme, and it's putting all of our pensions at risk. And here's a challenge to Bill Galvin. I asked you for the legal opinion on whether or not me and others on the Joint Negotiating Committee or on the Trustee Board, if they voted for these proposals to introduce a defined contribution scheme, knowing, as USS are telling us, that we will have a negative cash flow within 5 years, whether or not we should be personally liable for that reckless behaviour. I've got the legal information. You provided it to me, Bill. Why don't you publish that so everyone else can see it too? Thanks.